Israelis and the world is celebrating the news that the architect of the October 7th massacre is dead. Hamas leader Sinwar plotted the worst mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust.
Israeli forces finally caught up with Sinwar in the Gazan city of Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his death could be the beginning of the end of the war in Gaza. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Soon after the news, celebrations broke out at the Western Wall, at IDF posts in Gaza, and around the country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it's not the end of the war in Gaza, but the beginning of the end. He spoke directly to the people of Gaza.
I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice.
Sinwar planned the October 7th massacre, where terrorists killed nearly 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped more than 250, including Americans.
On this day, our thoughts are with the families of those murdered or kidnapped because of Sinwar.
IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the young soldiers who killed the terror leader didn't even realize it was Sinwar they were chasing. An IDF drone flew into the house where Sinwar was hiding and captured his final moments. Although the IDF fulfilled its pledge to bring Sinwar to justice, Hagari said the work is not done.
And we will continue to operate until we complete all our missions in defense of the people of Israel.
But some fear Hamas may kill all of the hostages now.
They might murder them or do something because of the murder of Sinwar. And that's the thing that I'm afraid of.
President Biden said he's already talking about the future with Netanyahu.
You start to destroy the land, bring repercussions wrong.
The U.S. State Department saw Sinwar as the major blockade to ending the war in Gaza.
He didn't just launch this conflict, but for the past year has refused the efforts of the United States and our partners to end it.
While some Gazans are sad about Sinwar's death, others see it as a chance to end the war that so devastated their lives. Netanyahu says this is indeed the time to end the war, not just with the Iranian proxy Hamas, but with Iran's entire axis of evil.
All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future. Together, we can push back the forces of darkness and create a future of light and hope for all of us.
May that come to pass. Here's what the Bible says when the wicked perish, and it's from Proverbs chapter 11, verse 10. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. So there's plenty of reason for jubilation in the streets of Jerusalem today because of this death, the architect of October 7th. And let's also look at the history here and how he repaid evil. He plotted evil against Israel, the very people that saved his life. Here he is. He's in jail. He murdered 4 Palestinians, not Jews, but Arab Palestinians. And the reason he murdered them is they made deals with Israelis. They were in business with Israelis, and he thought that that should be sufficient reason for their execution, so he murdered them. They put him in jail for those murders, and there he got brain cancer. And Israel provided him the medical care that he needed in order to live. That is kindness. And what does he do? He repays that kindness with this horrific evil. So is there reason for jubilation? Is there reason for celebration? The answer is yes. But at the same time, let's keep in mind the hostages are still there. And there are American citizens still there as hostages. Let us continue the effort until everyone can come home, everyone can be free. Unfortunately, we've already heard from members of Hamas that you can kill all our leadership and we're not going to change. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to come to peace with Israel. We're not going to release the hostages. So unfortunately, this war is going to go forward. Well, Chris Mitchell is with us now live from Jerusalem. So, Chris, tell us more about the reaction there to Sinwar's death.
Well, Gordon, here's one reaction, and this is the headlines of what's called Israel Hayom, and it quotes Psalm 18:37. I pursued my enemies and I overtook them. And Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, he quoted from Leviticus chapter 26, which says, and you shall chase your enemies and they shall fall before you by the sword. And some of the backstory, Gordon, they were eliminated. Sinwar was eliminated by reservists and really a simple group of soldiers. They were left behind in Rafah to, quote, clean up the area. And also some point out here in Israel that the news came out on the first day of the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, a feast celebrating God's goodness, protection, and provision to the Israelites as they wandered in the wilderness and brought them to the promised land. And for many here feel like after more than a year, they can celebrate a greater measure of being delivered for their enemies. And for Israelis, Gordon, it's really the equivalent or even more of the U.S. taking out Osama bin Laden. And for one more biblical reference, some people say it like Haman in the book of Esther being hanged before he could destroy the Jewish people.
Well, what's your view? Do you see this as an opening for the return of the hostages, or do you think the fighting is going to go on?
Well, that was probably the first question many people brought in mind right now. And as you mentioned, AP reported just a few minutes ago that a top Hamas official says they will not return the hostages in Gaza unless two things happen: a ceasefire and the withdrawal of IDF forces from Gaza. And those are the same demands that Sinwar had made for more than a year. So right now, it looks like there may be no hostage deal. How it goes in the future is uncertain. Will they continue to fight harder on the end, or could they soften given time and given that their leader is gone and lay down their arms and surrender and release the hostages? Some are saying the elimination of Sinwar, Gordon, was a miracle, since it was reported, that he was surrounded by 20 hostages and a suitcase full of explosives, and yet here he was eliminated with just 2 other terrorists there in Rafah.
How does Hamas continue to fight? It would seem to me that would run out of ammunition or run out of supplies, and how are they continuing to fight?
It's a great question, Gordon. A lot of people are asking the same question, but there seems to be some sort of a return of Hamas terrorists in the northern part of Gaza, and that's why many of the reservists or some of the soldiers were taken from the south up to the north. They certainly have exploited or depleted their source of rockets. They haven't been firing rockets. However, they're still continuing to fight. But you would think, Gordon, after the death of Sinwar and after that news goes through Gaza, that there may be some indication that maybe they would soften their demands and give up the fight. You would expect as well, Gordon, some of the population of Gaza, after suffering so long, after a year, would finally maybe try to maybe either turn over the Hamas terrorists or somehow try to end their suffering after more than a year.
Well, I hope that they do that. I think that's what's necessary, that the people of Gaza actually turn against this group and say, enough of you. But let's talk about the day after. Assuming that there is finally a day where Hamas doesn't exist anymore, which, that seems unfortunately unlikely. But what's the day after in Gaza? What's that going to look like?
Well, almost when the war began, that was one of the main questions as well. I would expect Israel right now will not want to stop the war until its goals are completed. The war goals they set out right at the beginning: defeat Hamas, Hamas no longer be able to govern Gaza, and free the hostages. And those goals haven't changed. For the day after, for months, Netanyahu has insisted that Israel would maintain security control over the Gaza Strip. And then there's other proposals. Could it be rebuilding by some of the Gulf nations? Some have advocated that the Palestinian Authority would be involved. but that's a non-starter for Israel. One thing that's going to have a profound impact on the day after, Gordon, is the U.S. election. And the sense here in Israel, it is if Kamala Harris wins, you're going to expect the same kind of intervention by the White House and the State Department that has been going on for many months. And based on his statements, some believe a Trump White House might be more of an advocate for Israel. So the election coming up really is going to have a pivotal impact on what happens the day after in Gaza.
All right. Well, I certainly pray that we stop all funding for UNRWA, that we stop all funding for this kind of terror. It seems quite evident in the aftermath of October 7th that the $16 billion in aid that went into Gaza didn't help the citizens there at all. It all went into military preparedness and into this horrible attack of October 7th. My hope, my prayer is that regardless of the new administration, that nonsense would absolutely stop. Well, Chris, thanks for the insight and thanks for joining with us.
What makes Israel so special? How has Israel overcome history's greatest challenges to not just survive, but thrive? CBN Films answers all of these questions in the new movie, The Genius of Israel. This movie explores Israel's journey through adversity, unity, and innovation. If you want to check out more, go to the link in the description to stream the film today.